Is this a story? Giant bear. Farmer. Hunter. House. Honey. Chomp. Well, no, it isn't. These things could be part of a story, but they're just disordered details right now with nothing to connect them together. To have a story, we need to have ideas that do connect to each other. So how about this? Is this a story? Someone's property is destroyed. They hire someone to retaliate, but it turns out that that person is in league with the culprit. The victim turns the two of them against each other in vengeance. We're still not quite there. These ideas do connect to each other, but they're a little too vague. It's the bones of a story with none of the meat. So let's put them together. How about this? A giant bear destroyed a farmer's house. He hired the bear hunter, but learned later that the bear hunter was in cahoots with the bear. He was bribing the bear with honey, and then pretending to catch the bear so that he could get paid. So, when the farmer learns this, he gets a bucket of honey and he dumps it on the bear hunter so that the bear eats him. The end. Is that a story? I think it counts. And in order to make it work, I needed two different kinds of ideas. The first set was made up of specific details, things that you can visualize. The second set was made up of abstract ideas about structure, which gave the story some order and made the details meaningful. A story needs both kinds of ideas, both structure and detail. By better understanding how they interact, you can gain a pretty good control over your creative process. Rather than just waiting for inspiration to strike, you can build new ideas step by step. But we're not quite there yet. In the first section of the video, I am going to explain where structure and detail come from, and why it's essential for writers to know how they work. In the second section, I'm going to explain how focusing on one over the other makes you either a plotter or a pantser. In the final section, I'll give you specific methods to use this new understanding to create imaginative plots, settings, and characters. So let's get started. Think back, way, way back, to when you were a tiny baby and you didn't know anything. Yes, we all feel that way sometimes, but really, when you were an infant, how did you get to understand the world around you? At that point, all you had were your senses. They gave you direct information about your immediate surroundings, about color and texture, about sound and flavor. In other words, all you had were the details. You could see that the sky was blue, but it would be a long time before you would think about why. Then, as you got older, you began to see repeating patterns in those details. You started to better understand that certain actions taken under certain circumstances would produce reliable results. Those patterns became beliefs about the world, rules and assumptions based on repeated experience. In other words, you started with the details, and then you built structures to explain them. Your beliefs about the world, your internal model of how things work, is very important. It allows you to make predictions. If you make incorrect predictions, you'll make bad choices and you might end up getting hurt. So it's crucial that you keep those beliefs up to date and accurate. That's why, when our senses give us something that we can't easily fit into a familiar pattern, our mind will go into overdrive to try to understand it, to put it into context, and to explain it. That drive to explain is also active when you read or watch fantasy, sci-fi, or any kind of imaginative fiction. You go into it knowing that the story is introducing you to a new world. It will be different from the real world in some ways, and similar to it in others. As the story presents you with fantastical concepts, your mind will be checking to see if they match any familiar patterns, trying to make sense of these new disconnected details. Slowly, the details of the new world come together to imply their own rules and structures, slightly different from the other structures that you've already seen in life and in fiction. If they were just the same, after all, what would be the point of reading? Of course, fiction has another tool up its sleeve. It can deliver structural information to you directly through things like narration, dialogue, and journal entries. In the biz, we call that exposition. In a story, both structure and detail serve their own important roles. The structure of a story makes it meaningful. A random collection of disconnected details is like an abstract painting. It doesn't have any information beyond what you infer or imagine for yourself. Structural ideas like plot and character arcs, like the laws of science and magic, like countries and factions or morals and themes, these are all things that stitch the ideas of the story together and make it so much more than the sum of its parts. The details, on the other hand, give the story an aesthetic. A structure without detail would be bland and empty. The details that you include can make your story feel realistic or surreal, wacky or subtle. They create the atmosphere of the setting through sensory description, and the personality of the characters through dialogue and body language. They are what allow you to see a story in your mind's eye as you read. When we are tiny babies, we are forced to build our structural understanding of the world based on details. But when we are grown-up writers, we can start from either structure or detail. People who start with details are sometimes called pantsers. They jump right onto the page without planning, so they don't know much about the structure of their story when they begin. Instead, they focus on establishing details. They discover their characters through dialogue and through description. As they improvise scenes, a plot will start to emerge. After completing the first draft, the pantser's job is to look at the details of their story and try to deduce a structure from them, just like we do in real life. Then they'll have to adjust the details of the story to fit that structure that they've discovered. People who start with the structure first are called plotters. They begin with an outline that creates an empty structure, a network of relationships and meanings that needs to be filled in with specific details. As they write their first draft, they're selecting the details that will fit in with that structure. But in the second draft, a plotter will also have to work to bring their detail and structure closer together to get them to harmonize. No matter how you start, in the end you're going to have to deal with both. But the real benefit to understanding structure and detail is in idea generation. None of us can create new ideas from nothing. We need material in order to build them, and we're limited to what's inside our own heads, the results of our own experiences with the real world. So how do we take those old ideas and make them into something new and unique? One way to do that is by mixing and matching the structures and details of various things. When you add different details to an existing structure, the structure will be forced to adjust, to reshape itself around those new ideas. In that way, it becomes something new. The same is true of adapting existing details to a new structure. The act of interpretation is the act of creation. This works on every level of a story. You could use it to create a premise or plot by borrowing the structure from another story, or from the life of a real person, or from maybe a particular time in history. For example, if you chose the period after the death of Alexander the Great, you might extract structural details like this. There is a power vacuum, leaving control of immense resources up for grabs, and many parties are vying for that control. Two cultures have been forced to blend. Will they grow more intertwined, or will they drift apart? Then you could pair those structures with details borrowed from another time and place in history, or from a particular style or aesthetic, or from an established genre. Instead of the successor states to an empire, you might go cyberpunk and follow the upstarts scavenging the remains of a bankrupt megacorp. Instead of blending Persian and Greek culture, you might explore the relations between goblins and orcs. You can also use structure and detail to generate ideas for characters. You can take structural inspiration from the biography of a real or fictional person, dividing their life into phases like privileged childhood, military service, brief retirement, and a higher calling. Then, you can graft on details borrowed from other characters and people, quirks, ways of moving and speaking, fashion choices, etc. But one of my favorite ways to use structure and detail is in world building. After all, a fictional world is just a remixed version of our own. By taking the structure of something that already exists and adapting it to a new set of details, you can come up with some wonderfully fresh ideas. So to close out this video, I'll do just that. I'll take you through my process of inventing a whimsical new vehicle using this method. To start, we'll borrow some structure from something that already exists. Let's use a sailing ship. Here's the structure that I have extracted from it. It is a vehicle that moves you across large bodies of water. It is powered by the wind. It has multiple floors. It can carry cargo. And it requires a crew to operate. So I'll be creating something new to serve that same purpose, to carry people and cargo across the water. But I'm going to shake things up by borrowing the details from something else. I will use a grandfather clock. These are the details that I harvested from it. It's made from polished wood and brass. It houses a delicate mechanism of gears. It has clock hands that move around in a circle. It is tall and box-shaped. Now, in order to blend these ideas together, I'll start by just writing down the connections that I see between them. I like the idea that, rather than floating on the surface of the water, our new vehicle could walk along the bottom using legs that move like the hands of a clock. It would probably need a lot of them in order to be stable, so they might act more like the spokes of a wheel. In order for it to be powered by the wind without having a sail, it probably has some kind of windmill. That windmill could be set into the front, like the face of the grandfather clock. Then the vehicle would always be facing into the wind, so it would make sense for its prow to be tapered like a ship's rather than flat. The windmill will be connected to the legs by a system of gears. One of the crew's duties can be to keep them oiled and running smoothly. The main structure can be like a wooden building made of timbers and planks. The brass can be used for railings and fittings, and the frames around portholes. Because it doesn't need to be buoyant, it could carry a lot of cargo. It would make sense to put all that cargo near the bottom, to try to give it a lower center of gravity and keep it from toppling over. In fact, the bottom could drag just below the water to create some drag and keep it from swinging back and forth. You could also put a rudder down there to help steer. That means that the crew quarters would need to be near the middle, and the helm at the very top, where it would provide a good vantage point to sight for land. So, what do you think? Do you like my clock walker? I dare you to say that 10 times fast. Even more than that, I dare you to try this out for yourself. It's not easy per se, but it does work. And if you've watched to the end of the video, I appreciate it. Since we're here, I'll take these last few moments to introduce myself. My name is Harry. I write fantasy and occasionally sci-fi. As much as I like actually writing, I also really like thinking about writing, and I like talking about thinking about writing, and I like filming myself talking about thinking about writing, and so this YouTube channel is the place for all of that. So if you liked what I had to say this time, you ought to subscribe and hit the bell thing so that you can catch the next one too. There's more to come. And on the off chance that you, dear viewer, are also a YouTuber in this writing and creativity space, I would like to talk to you. I'm trying to do a little networking to find people with whom to collaborate and commiserate. If that sounds interesting, hit me with a comment and we'll talk. Until next time, happy writing.